to talk today about spiritual intelligence, but I want to locate that in the integral map so you have some sense of where we're coming from and what we're talking about. This is the integral map. If those of you who are not familiar with it, it's going to look really pretty daunting. But at various times in here on these Saturday mornings, we take various little pieces of it and we talk about it. And today, we're going to be talking about the spiritual line of development. Now, when we think about spirituality, usually we think about waking up, about enlightenment, about witness consciousness and non-duality. That is a direct experience of reality, a direct spiritual experience. But there's another kind of way to look at spirituality, and that's to look at it as a process of growth. So that when we first think about spirituality, we often have fairly limited ideas about it, fairly often rigid, simplistic. And as we grow, our view of spirituality gets more and more complex, more nuanced. We have more perspective on it. So that is the spiritual line of development that we all go through. And that's actually more accessible to people, usually, than the direct experience. There was a guru, and I can't remember his name, but he said, enlightenment is an accident, but meditation makes you accident prone. So we can't make an accident happen. Well, we can in the car, I suppose, but for us, we can't make enlightenment happen. But we can grow ourselves spiritually and make us more prone to having that kind of experience. And in the process, as we grow, we make ourselves into better people, wiser people, more compassionate people. So the spiritual line, and I'm just going to show you a little bit here, if I can get this thing. These are the stages of development that we go through. We start out with an instinctive self, and then we come to a sort of a conservative rule self. Then we develop a rational mind, start thinking for ourselves. Then we develop more of a heart-centered, compassionate look at the world. And then we get an integral self, which brings these together, and so on. So growth happens like that, but it happens in different ways. It can happen emotionally, and it can happen cognitively. And today we're going to talk about spiritually. So here are some of the lines of the development. The self-sense changes, the emotional maturity changes. Oh yeah, I want to go to the next slide. Yeah, you're right. Yes, there we go. Okay, so our self-sense changes, our emotional maturity grows, our relational maturity, interpersonal skills grow, our morals grow. We have a more nuanced view of morality. Kinesthetic, several other lines. But today we're going to talk about the spiritual line. And you can see that's kind of laid on top of states of consciousness. The states of consciousness that most of us probably have heard of are the gross, subtle, causal, and non-dual. And that is like the background, the ground of being. But we can grow ourselves spiritually, in a sense, on top of that. So the spiritual line is about what is of ultimate concern to me. And if you're at a low level of development, it's going to be where I'm going to get my next meal. The next thing is, how am I going to make myself look good? And then the other is, how am I going to go, be a part of my religion and stick to the rules, and so on. We get more and more advanced views of spirituality. We get more and more advanced views of how we relate to God, for example. We might see God initially as some person sitting in a throne in the sky, and then we discard that idea for maybe a sense of God as a giant intelligence. And then perhaps we'll move from that to seeing God as spirit. Anyway, all of these conceptions, we let go of them as we get a more mature one. We say, okay, what I was thinking about maybe not where I could be going with it. There's a man named James Fowler, if anybody's really interested in pursuing this, who wrote about stages of spiritual development. And now we have Cindy Wigglesworth, who has defined what it means to be spiritually intelligent and looked at the various ways that we develop all of these different types of spiritual intelligence. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to let Jose talk about that. We've just been to a conference about it and he did a certification before that, so you're steeped in it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So basically, when we talk about spirituality, Lynn was explaining, we think about meditation and states, but there is another complete way to see spirituality, which is how we make meaning. So in order to talk about the concept of spiritual intelligence, let's start talking a little bit about intelligence. So the first thing is that research shows that there are multiple intelligence. And one of the problems in the past is that people were seen as being intelligent or not based on what is called IQ, that only really measures your ability to be the capacity to solve problems in mathematics and in linguistics. That's basically the two things that the IQ measures. Logical reasoning, which is mathematical reasoning, and the capacity to make relationships between meanings of words and that type of thing. So then it was discovered, or it was clear, that there was another type of intelligence called emotional intelligence. There's also another intelligence called physical intelligence or kinesthetic intelligence. Obviously, a guy like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, when you see them playing basketball, it's like probably seeing God playing basketball, the more developed. But also when you hear a poet or an artist, they might not be very good at mathematics, but they're excellent at the emotional capacity to express or the what is called the beauty aesthetics. Thank you, my translate. So that's the first idea. There's different intelligence. So what is intelligence? Intelligence can be defined as innate potential that is brought into form through practice or adaptness or appropriately reasoning behavioral choice. Now that we are getting into another intelligence, which is artificial intelligence, is another one that is coming up. There is a definition of intelligence that is the broadest definition of intelligence, is the capacity to solve a problem. Obviously, painting a beautiful painting, it's a problem or a task, and the capacity to do it well is aesthetic intelligence. So I think that definition of the capacity to solve a problem covers most a situation covers more all types of intelligences. And we know that the IQ has its limits. As human beings, this is Einstein, as human beings, one has been endowed with just enough intelligence to be able to see clearly how utterly inadequate that intelligence is when confronted with what exists. So that was Albert Einstein. So we have here that are multiple intelligences: IQ, moral intelligence, spiritual intelligence, aesthetic intelligence, or physical intelligence or kinesthetic intelligence. And you can be lower, medium, or highly developed in each one of these intelligence. And obviously, it has to be with training and where you're putting your attention most of the time. Now, there is a model of the four intelligence and the way that these intelligence develop that is correlated with age. Not necessarily. There's a lot of people who have a lot of age and very little spiritual or emotional intelligence, but in general, it's correlated with the time you are living and having experiences. So first you have body awareness and skillful use. That is something that kids develop. Then we have math and verbal intelligence, managing ourselves and relationships well, which is the spiritual, emotional intelligence. And finally, the inner wisdom guided by compassion and equanimity, which is what we call the spiritual intelligence. And spiritual intelligence can be as a capstone of the other intelligence. It's not just something that is developed, but it's like a capstone that can be elevated as we develop the other intelligences. By the way, I'm making a parenthesis here. If any one of you wants a copy of this presentation or the slides, if you're part of our list, just send us an email, and because that's our role here is to teach and help everyone. And in this, if you give the attribution of the slides to Cindy Wigglesworth and to Integral Sedona, you can use it and everything. That's the idea. Okay. So that's for intelligence. Okay, so now we talk about intelligence. Now we're going to talk about another concept that is important in integral theory. It is the quadrants. Now, there are many quadrants, and one confusion that some people have is that every time we talk about quadrants, we're talking about the Wilber quadrants of the quadrants of existence, and that's not true. And I'm going to talk about the quadrants of spiritual intelligence, but they're not the same quadrants of the actual model. So let me give you some examples. This is a quadrant. Everybody learns this in the school. The XY axis, it creates 4 quadrants. The positive, positive, the positive, negative, the negative, negative, and the negative, positive. So all of these are different quadrants. There are 4 possibilities, okay? Is that clear? This is positive, 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 negative, 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 and that is positive, negative. Now, this is another way to see the quadrants. For example, if you say things that are urgent and not urgent, and things that are important and not important, then you create a way to see things, because things that are urgent and important are crisis emergencies. Things that are not urgent but are important, you can plan. Things that are urgent and not important is interruptions. That I know my wife doesn't like a lot. And not urgent and not important is just what you're wasting your time. So the beauty of quadrants, which is what Ken understand, is that everything that happens in the world, for some reason, tetra arises. So so another quadrant here. There's another crisis.
We want to make it clear that these things don't all tetra arise necessarily. He talks about that.
Yeah. Okay, so for example, if you say, this also is another way to see polarities. If you say, I want the polarity between people that cooperate and not people that compete, and people that are insider and outsider, what are the situations that happen when I say that? For example, if a cooperator is an insider, belongs to the community and can be trusted, but the cooperator is an outsider, does not belong here, and must be avoided. So you can see things in different ways. So let's continue. The other one that is very important concept is the one called the Johari window, and is what the things that are known by both you and others are open things. The things that are the blind spot is the unknown to you but known to others. For example, a spot in my shirt in the back that I cannot see. The things that are hidden is the things that I know, but it's not by others. For example, the color of our underwear. Mm-hmm. And the unknown is true. And the unknown is the things that you don't know, and nobody knows that you don't know. That's what science is moving into. So that's the concept of quadrants. And of course, we have the quadrants of the integral theory. Is that every single thing in existence, what that we call a whole on, that is a whole that is a part of something. We are a whole that are part of the ecosystem. Every cell in my body is a whole cell that is part of my body. That's the idea. Each column has an interior, is individual, collective, interior, and exterior. So the interior of the individual is the subjective. The exterior of the individual is the objective. So the subjective is how I feel, and this is how my senses and and the things that happen in my body. Down there we have culture. The individual of the collective of the interior. The interior of this collective, these are the rules, the cultures. We sit here, we cannot have more than 25 people in this place. There are several rules and regulations that come here in the inter-objective. So we are going to have, over the years, a specific quote-unquote classes in which we're going to go into each one of these in detail. So we're going to have one thing like this just in quadrants to explain that concept. So we have now intelligence and quadrants. Yes?
Before you move on, I think we should point out that what we're talking about today is mostly the upper left quadrant. Spirituality is found in this upper left.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. But you know that. Okay, so we are going to talk about intelligence and a particular line of intelligence which is spiritual. And for that, there is a conceptual model that was created for emotional intelligence. So now this part of the quadrant, that first quadrant is subdivided in 4 again. What happens for us? We have the self and others, and actions and awareness. Okay, so at the first level we have self-awareness. It has to do with ourselves and what we know about ourselves. And as we move in our relationships and the exteriority, we create social awareness. Self-management is the way we self and actions give how we behave. And others and actions are the relationship skills. So this is how the model of emotional intelligence was created. That gives a positive impact on others. If we know ourselves, we know how we relate to others, we manage the way we relate to others, and we define how to relate between others, that's the essence of emotional intelligence. So this is the model that Cindy used to create. Cindy Weaver, the creator of this model, used the same model to create the idea of spiritual intelligence. So first of all, we have self-awareness. We start there. That will immediately impact the awareness of others and the way we manage ourselves. And we will end up here in what are the relationship skills. And these, the way we have, the skills we have to relate to other people will give feedback to ourselves. If people react back to me, and I am spiritually intelligent and emotional intelligent, I know that there's something wrong that I'm doing. And maybe the other people are doing things wrong, but I don't have a way to control that. So the only variable that I have in my hand is my own self-awareness and changing myself. Is that clear? Thank you. Now, seeing this definition of spiritual intelligence. So this is what we're going to work with. We're going to work with spiritual intelligence is the ability to behave, and that's the solving of the problem, is our action, with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace, equanimity, regardless of the situation. I think it's a good definition. And at least it's something that if everybody has high spiritual intelligence, this will be a great world. So it reflects an increasingly stable to connection to something bigger than us, which is what you were saying, that is translating into the world of behaviors, habits, and attitudes. It's answering the question, what is of ultimate concern to me? Now, for that definition, we have to know, this is very important. We define what intelligence is. Now we're going to define what wisdom is. Other people might think wisdom is other things, but for this talk and for our understanding, this is what we're talking about, wisdom. Wisdom is knowing from deep insight and experience and selects highest and best course of action for this situation, guided by compassion. There is a movement with the way we process inside the information that we have that ends up in wisdom. So we can be uninformed. We don't have any information. Then we have that data. It's just raw data. Zeros, ones, yeses and nos, up and down. It's just data. Then that data becomes information because it's framed. If I say yes and no, it's data. But if I give you a question, that data becomes information. If I say, is this apple red or is apple red? And I say here yes and no. Now you have that yes and no, which was data, becomes information because it's related to something. From information we go to knowledge, which is a deeper understanding of that information. Is framed. Now we know which the apple. We know exactly what apple refers, and we have the knowledge that an apple is green, and we see the apple. And finally, we go to wisdom. Now I don't know what the wisdom in this example of the apple would be. Maybe that the wisdom is that is good for you to eat, and that because of the knowledge and information that is organic will be better for our nutrition. That can be.
That's it.
What will be the wisdom in the apple example? That has nothing to do with the Adam and Eve.
Wisdom has more to do with meaning and right application, I think.
Yeah, in this example of the apple, it will have, things to do with yes.
I have a friend who's a rabbi who years ago said to me, the apple is the perfect food because it contains all the nutrients and everything, and it has its own skin that's biodegradable. You can throw it out anywhere, and
Yeah.
it doesn't hurt the planet. And I mean, to me, it's something like
Yeah, there's a higher level of information, wisdom, and it's something that we know. So that is
But whether or not to eat it would be the wisdom.
whether or not to eat
Are you
it.
in the Garden of Eden? Don't eat it. It goes somewhere else.
Okay. So again, we're going back. The wisdom is the knowing from deep inside an experience. So there's a more important and profound ways in the wisdom guides us than information. And that's what he's trying to reflect, this idea. Okay, so the next word in that definition was compassion. It's a feeling another person's suffering and spontaneously desiring to help relieve that suffering, guided by wisdom. So it's another definition of compassion. Now, in this definition of compassion, we go from antipathy to apathy to sympathy to empathy to compassion. And you can see how that develops. One thing about compassion that it's important and that has important relationship with the theme of spiritual intelligence is the fact that studies have shown that in the long run, when we experience empathy, we are much more likely to turn away from the person hurting because our mirror neurons, we are experiencing the pain as if it is happening to us. So, if you are in the helping profession and you don't have high spiritual intelligence and high emotional intelligence, you are going to be affected by the pain on others and you don't know how to manage it inside. This is not saying that compassion is bad. What it's saying is that compassion without high spiritual intelligence and high emotional intelligence makes you into a co-victim. And then you end up saying, oh, this world is terrible, and you're part of the fight, not part of the solution. It's a very important thing. And the last part is while maintaining inner and outer pace, equanimity. So what is this equanimity? Let's say equanimity includes inner peace as well as outer peace. Using force of will to maintain outer peace when we don't have inner peace will cause leaks of frustration in other situations or areas of our lives. It's not about tensing ourselves. So spiritual intelligence helps us to manage our emotions. Emotional intelligence helps us manage our emotion, and spiritual intelligence works to unseat to the triggers so that the emotions do not arise in the first place. It causes the limbic system to calm down and not to react. This is another important thing that when we have spiritual intelligence, we have. Equanimity allows you to have your full intelligence, EQ capacities, and that will be in the face of any situation that happens. You can be emotionally intelligent, and you can be intelligent to solve the problem.
Can I just say one thing? I think it's that not that emotions don't arise, but it's what Ken said, it hurts more but bothers you less. You still feel the pain, you still have the emotions, you have full access to all your emotions, but you don't get overwrought about them or something like that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I wanna repeat that because I think it's and just for the recording also. Ken says, hurts more but bothers less, and the the important thing about this phrase "hurts more" is that it hurts more because you're more aware. You really know the nuances of what is happening. And bothers less is because you have grown to a point in which you know that you have to accept things as they are. Because any energy that you put to try to, oh, this should not be happening, the should, or the past, is energy that you are wasting for the present and going forward. So thank you for that. You can simply behave with more compassion and more wisdom when you are living in equanimity. Equanimity is not being a robot with no emotions, never crying or feeling upset. It's not turning out the world, and is not acting from self-righteousness certitude. It is a commitment to living fully in the now, being in this experience of pain and suffering and joy, but not being attached to the experiences or to any specific outcomes. A balance between absolute and relative. And easy to say. But the whole thing about developing spiritual intelligence is to develop the capacity to act with wisdom and compassion while maintaining equanimity without regard of what the situation is. There is a legend or a story about the Buddha in which there was this man that was an assassin that used to jump to travelers, and it's a little bit gruesome, to cut their fingers, and he has this collar of fingers, and he wanted to have 101 fingers, because when he had 101 fingers he will become a god. That was his idea. So when he had 101 finger was left,
Low level of spiritual intelligence.
the Buddha was walking, and the guy jumped in front of the Buddha to collect his last finger, and the Buddha was so calm and present and with equanimity that this man started to shout and everything and say, "Why are you not afraid?" And because the Buddha never got afraid, this man started calming down. Long story short, he became a monk, and one of the 5 illumined Buddha monks that follow his task, his teachings. So this is the practical thing, because we talk about spirituality a lot, and we want to meditate, and we want to have all these experiences, and we want to get enlightened and be called master and awaken. But I will say that, yeah, that's great, but what about being a calm and loving presence in the world? Because we know a lot of gurus that are not exactly that. Okay. Let's define the word spirit and the word ego again for what we're talking. Spirit and higher self is about unity, connection, service, abundance, long-term thinking, win-win solutions. That's the idea. And ego is about separation, isolation, scarcity, self-protection, short-term thinking, win-lose, or quid pro quo. Now, this also is telling us that we're talking about what we call the lower self, or the way of being, the personality. So a spiritual intelligence is to develop our presence in the world, not the absolute, but the relative, to a point that we are that calming presence. And in another one of these talks, Lynn is going to be talking about a very specific part of ego development, all the way up to supermind of what is yeah. So we will see what a person at that level really is, and the way they can see the world. Okay, so having defined these terms, now we're going to see the quadrants of spiritual intelligence. So the SQ4 quadrants are stacked on the EQ, or spiritual emotional intelligence quadrants. So that the self-awareness, remember, which was the upper part, now becomes self-awareness. So self-awareness that was just the self-awareness of it's myself becomes the self-awareness of what my inner real self is. That's what this skill is. Are you fully aware of your inner nature? These are the questions associated with each one of these quadrants. Are you aware that your dual self, that you have a limit, a lower self and an absolute self, that you are both spirit and projection in this world, and body, mind, and spirit? Are you aware of that? Do you sense when ego is in charge? Mostly 99% of the time. Can you hear the voice of the higher self? Mostly 1% of the time. Do you have a clear inner intention, a clear personal mission and value? So those are the questions now that are asked in that quadrant. And that is the skill of being self-awareness. Now, the higher self, ego mastery. So social awareness is now universal awareness. So here was social awareness. In the EQ, we have the awareness of other people and how to relate to them. But in a spiritual intelligence, we're talking about being aware of the universe. Not only the relationships with people, we're talking about being aware of the planet, the animals, the stars, the Big Bang, the whole shebang, how the whole thing is happening, how the evolution and everything. That's what we're talking about. How broad is your perspective? Can you see other people's viewpoint, other cultures? How long a timeline can you imagine? Are you live only? Do you live a life only of 80, 90 years of timeline, or you know yourself to be part of the 13.78 billion years that we have been in existence as a universe? How big is the universe? How interconnected is reality? So that's the book. So now the other quadrant, self-management, which was how to behave yourself, is now higher self-ego, self-mastery. So it's not only self-management so that you have a good relationship in your marriage, or you behave in a good way in the company and you are an effective member of society. We're talking about self-mastery. What percentage of the time is higher self in charge? Do you know how to shift ego out of the driver's seat? Do you live your values and your mission? Can you stay centered and peaceful during difficult times? And finally, relationships managers become social mastery and spiritual practice, spiritual presence. So it's not about social mastery with, before. In EQ, relationship management was the skill here. Relationship management was basically with the intent of having be a good member of society and know how to move in society. That was the idea of IQ. But the idea of a spiritual intelligence is social mastery is your spiritual presence. Are you a calming presence for others? Can you keep your heart open? Are you able to act from compassion? Are you able to act from wisdom? Are you a powerful leader by virtue of your inner strength and humanity? So these are the 4 quadrants of what we call spiritual intelligence. This dotted line represents the fact that one may start in either one of the 2 upper quadrants. And that's because it depends on the experience that you have. You can have a state experience that is more here. One day you're just walking and all of a sudden, boom, you feel part of the universe. Or you're making love and you have this amazing experience of union with everything. Or you're reading a book and all of a sudden it's like things become so clear for you. Or you're in Mass and you go on communion and you have this, divine experience of a presence, whatever. Or you can have personal experiences of awareness. You can have, all of a sudden you realize, wow, I have a body. This might be sounding very strange, but most people don't even realize that. That just what a miracle, I have a body. And I can think, I move my finger and the finger moves. That's a miracle. But people just take it for granted. You can have those experiences. And that's what you can start there. So you can start getting insight that this dotted line represents that this is interrelated. Now, the skills in quadrant also dependent on the mastery of the skills of quadrant 3. The skills in quadrant 4 depends on the skills on quadrant 3. If you don't have self-mastery, it's very difficult for you to be a healing and calm presence and be an example. Like the Course of Miracles says that to teach is to demonstrate. It's not to say things. It's to demonstrate the things you say. Say the things are said already in the Course. You have to demonstrate what the Course says. That's what really teaching is. Okay, so these 2 interfere each other, and then your self-awareness definitely feeds your self-mastery, and as you have self-mastery, you can have a spiritual presence. And that goes back, as you have a spiritual presence, it goes back to inform your self-awareness. So and from here on, what I want to do is, there's 2 elements here. First is, this has been made into a test. Any one of you can take this test in a website that's called Deep Change. You take the test, and then you can debrief with a coach. Lynn and I are coach, and if any one of you wants to take the test, contact us. And I'm going to explain what the test does, and what happens is once you take the test and you know at least what, according to your answers, is your skill in each one of the 21 skills, then you can have a coaching session in which you are going to be given specifically what type of things you can do to increase those skills. And it's a very good conversation for you, because it's not a judgment conversation. It's a way to start the conversation on these things. I mean, this is not to tell you that you're not developed or you're developed. It's just a way to measure and have a very specific way to talk about these things that usually are a little bit wishy-washy. The importance of this work of Sidney Wilbur score is this is not a theory. This is a very PhD level developed, statistically proven. All these skills have been tested, and the questions associated with these skills have been gone through a lot of statistics ways, and they take into account how people answer, and there are questions that verify the other questions that you do. So you can say something in one part, but say something in another part that will show that you're really not. It's built as the intelligent tests that you take when you take an IQ. You know? Okay, so the first quadrant, self-awareness, there are 5 skills. The first one is awareness of your own worldview, and we're going to go very quickly to each one of them. The second one is awareness of your life purpose. The third one is awareness of your values hierarchy, very important. Parenthesis. John has a question?
No. I'm sorry, I was late. I'll just trying to catch up here. So.
Yeah, and like I say,
there was an emotional quadrant too. It sounds like before that.
well, no, this model was built on top of the very famous emotional intelligence studies that are, and all the tests that have been validated. So, in top of that model, this model was built. So, it has a lot of scientific basis there, and statistic strength.
And that emotional intelligence that's been further developed along the same lines too. I mean,
Yeah, emotional intelligence is a very used tool in there's a company as Hay, which is a very big management consulting company, and you can take a test of your EQ, and it will tell you where are all your skills and everything.
Or you can read the book by Daniel Goleman.
Or the book by Daniel Goleman. Yeah, but there is and there are all kinds of tests of emotional intelligence. We'll show you the different skills. The 5th skills is awareness of ego, higher self. The 6th one is awareness of interconnectedness of life. 7 is awareness of worldviews of others. 8th is breadth of time perception. 9th is awareness of limitations, power of human perception. 10th is awareness of spiritual laws, and we'll talk about that. 11, experience of the transcendent ones. Then the 3rd quadrant, your self-mastery. The skills there are commitment to spiritual growth. So we'll see that. Then the 13 is keeping the higher self in charge. 14, living your purpose and values, which is different from having values. This is living your purpose and values. The 15 is sustaining faith, which is another important skill. 16 is seeking guidance from higher self. It's how much you trust your own self and how much you really connect with your own self. We'll see that. And then social mastery, spiritual presence is what Ken Wilber calls the show up. What will we do in this world? Wise and effective teacher and mentor. Wise and effective leader, change agent. Makes compassionate and wise decisions. 20, a calming, healing presence. And 21st, being aligned with the ebb and flow of life. So, let's start by talking about, the first one says awareness of our own worldview. And this is easy to understand. So why is that we have to have awareness of our own worldview? Because this is our worldview. We see everything through our nose. And we say, this is the way the world is. This is the best. I mean, to me, when I saw this, it's okay. You don't have to even say anything. Okay. Now, the thing about this is that you can evolve the way you see things. If you look at this, I mean, he hasn't evolved in making this small, because you can paint. If you have a wider view, you can paint the whole savanna where it is, and the horn will be this big, right? It will be a different worldview. So, from what Lynn said in the beginning, now, the idea is that each one of these skills has levels. It develops in levels. So let's see how the worldview is. So the skill of awareness of your own view. If you are at level 1, and please, this is not better or worse, or it's just the way it is. That's how people develop. So you start by, can you describe your own belief system? I mean, if I, and the question that is going to be there is, it's a Likert scale of no all the way to completely, you know, and you choose. So can you describe your own belief system? It's something you have to answer yourself. The second is,
Can I just say something
yes.
about the first one? Because
Come here so that this is recorded, sweetie. You can say
not
whatever.
everybody could probably write a really beautiful description of their own belief system, but what this is getting at is, are you aware really that you have one?
Yes.
That what you have is beliefs. It's not just everything is true the way you see it. So I think that's a.
No.
I'd like to see them change that.
Well, okay. Again, this is like a spiritual intelligence on the IQ. This is the version 1.1, and I have to say that Cindy has spent 20 years and a lot of money in developing. And obviously, as these get bigger and bigger, other people will come, other researchers will come, and it will increase and increase. You'll be one of them. So the second level is a person. Am I aware that my own worldview is not the only legitimate worldview? Because you can describe your worldview very well. We have a person that describes his worldview every day, and he says, and I am the only one that knows how it works. So he knows his worldview and his belief system. He can describe it perfectly, but he thinks he's the only one. Third, I am able to see with humor and compassion both the need for a worldview and the inherent limitations of any worldview. This is a higher thing, because now you not only know that you have a belief system, you don't only know that it's not the only legitimate, but you know that it's just a creation. It's just your belief system. It's not the only one, but it's not even the truth one, because there's no truth one. It's just a creation. It's a fabrication. Fourth, a man profoundly humble and non-attached about most personal beliefs, whilst at the same time able to remain clear and centered and connected to the universal truths, anchored and open. Now, universal truths. So there's more understanding of it. And finally, I am a calm and non-judgmental, courageous and centered, loving and timeless. Most people find me to be a reassuring presence who is not imposing any beliefs. That will be. Now, this is showing you a path of developing your worldview. A person grows in spiritual intelligence as approaches to this. You might not agree exactly with all of them, but what is important is that this is a progression to better. Could we agree? We might not be exactly 100% aware with each word, but you can see the progression. And the idea is that once you take the test and they say you are level 3, there's a discussion of all these elements that helps you to see things that you're not seeing about this particular skill. And we have 20 more.
One quick question.
Yes.
Universal truth, you're going to touch base on who determines what's the universal truth?
That's why it's in quotes.
Well, what does it mean being in quotes? Is this commonly accepted, universally accepted?
Yeah, yeah.
All three?
I'm sorry?
I gave you three options and you said yeah.
Well, the universal truths, the way I see it is things that most people will accept. You know, that will I call an universal truth. For example, it's a universal truth that everybody needs to eat. But there are people that say they are breatharians, that they don't have to eat. I haven't been proved that, but that's the way I see universal truth.
I want to say, I think she means something different here.
Okay.
I think what she means by universal truths is spiritual truths, absolute truths. And she puts them in quotes because they're going to be different for everybody. I think people are going to find those, I mean, ultimately they may be the same. People are going to see them in different ways. So I think she puts it in quotes, not to make it a rule, not to say that, I think. But I think it is about spiritual truths, and there's not, she's not going to define what those are, I think.
But again, when you can you give me the three options again?
Well, universal truth to me,
Mm-hmm.
universal truth to you, universal truth to most people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say universal truth to most people.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I would say no.
Well, that's
Two different truths.
And I
Clearly,
wouldn't
that's
say,
not universal
I wouldn't
truth.
say any one of those three. Yeah, I would.
okay. The way I personally, the way I personally relate to universal truths, it's something that inside, and this is talking about it feels that is the truth. What is the answer that I have me inside about the question, does God exist?
And that's what Lynn was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's when you feel yourself most in touch with God or universal truth or all that is or whatever it is, when you feel yourself most in, you have a resonance. There's a resonance. Ken Wilber talks about this. Truth resonates. And when you feel that resonance, that's a universal truth. People, depending on their level of development, are going to have more and less resonance. So people are going to define it differently at each
Well,
level.
actually, the word personal before universal truths would.
Yeah.
Would, to your personal universal
Universal
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
I'm here
Yeah.
evolving on.
Well, no, I think it's about universal truth. I think it's the idea that there is an absolute truth, which we can resonate with closer and closer and closer and closer, maybe never perfectly. But the definition of what that is has been it's been defined in one religion this way and another one that way, and
So it's
you
still
know.
your personal experience
Yeah.
of a universal.
Yeah.
But the thing that is important, I think the thing that's important here is that this conversation is open when you work with this skill. No, I'm serious.
Exactly.
The point about the SQ and the assessment is that a person can talk to a SQ coach and have this discussion. It's not because who knows what is the universal truth. I mean, the idea is that there is some growth and some capacity to touch that thing that is truth inside of me by having this discussion. That's the idea.
Is the world being round a universal truth?
That's a fact.
That's a fact.
What's a universal truth?
Well, but it's not what
It's
when
not
you
a spiritual truth. We're talking here about
it's
spiritual
talking about the spiritual.
truth, not factual.
Yeah.
What would be an example of, say, the universal truth that all the 5 or 10 major religions of the world could agree on, but in general, they're in that category, not personal, but
Well, that there is an ultimate concern and that they know what it is. All of them are saying this is the ultimate thing,
Oh, there is a reality which is not this.
which is not a yeah.
reality. There's a reality beyond what we all experience. I think most religions have something like that.
Most religions also have what they call an avatar or initiator of the religion. Yeah. So, but the point here is that Are you aware that there is no absolute agreement in people that there's no universal truth? Because if you have let's say, a spiritual intelligence at a lower level, you're going to find that the universal truth is that the God of the Bible is the God, and outside the Catholic Church there is no salvation. And then you're not having a spiritual intelligence that includes other people. So that's it. This is the discussion that this type of skills help people to get in touch with and grow. Okay, let's see the second skill. Awareness of life purpose, mission, calling, or vocation. So the first is, I want to live a life with each aligned with my highest purpose. Look what it says, it's my, not the, my. So you have to define what your highest purpose is. So do you have a highest purpose and you live a life aligned with that? I can describe my spiritual gifts and my weaknesses without false humility or grandiosity. I see how spiritual gifts can contribute to understanding life purpose. So that's a next level. Next level is, I can describe my personal life purpose, mission, vocation, or calling. It's not saying that yours is the only one or anything. It says that you're aware of it, because that's awareness of life purpose. You know what it is, you can describe it, and like you say, and I stick to it. The fourth is, I thoroughly examine my decisions and actions to make sure they support my mission, intensively reflective, highly self-aware. So this, it talks about consistency with what you believe. You not only know what you believe and what's your mission, but you consistently align with that. And finally, my mission is so clear and stable that I can resist temptation or diversions. Note, sometimes as we enlarge ourselves, our life challenges may enlarge as well. So again, the idea in this skill is going from basically not knowing what is your life mission to not only knowing your life mission, but living your life mission, and having that life mission take into account a lot of things about what your life is and what the reality is. The third skill is awareness of values hierarchies. Most people don't know what their values are, and most people have never made a list. They say, this, my first value is this, my second value is this, my third value is this, and they live by those values. So the idea is, I understand why it's important for me to have personal values. It's not about what values are. Every person can have them. Remember, this is a skill for you to become spiritually intelligent. And part of that skill is that you know what are your personal values. It's not about what these values are good or wrong. It's, do you know what they are? You can specifically state your values. Naming them and believing in them is all that is needed for level 2. My highest value is true, my second value is family, my third value is my career, my fourth value is contribution. But you know clear which values are they. Third, my personal values are connected to the voice of my higher self. These values serve compassion, wisdom, and peace. My actions rarely or only sometimes deviate from my values, sometimes or never a special note. So you have your values and you stick to them no matter what. Fourth, I have rank ordered my values. Now this is a higher level. Ranking a value is a very revealing way. Let's say your values are family and contribution to society. Which one is more important? The way to know that is very simple. Can you have family without contribution to society? So what you say, yes or no? Yes. Can you have contribution to society without value? No. So that means that contribution to society, family is higher than contribution to society. It's not that it doesn't exist, but the way for you to understand is, can I have value A without having value B? That's how you know which one is higher than the other one. then you can say, okay, of course I'm going to have contributions to society. But if my contribution to society, let's say that because you're going to contribute to society, you have to forget about your family. Will you be able to do that? Some people do. They go in Peace Corps, or they go in the army. That's because they value contribution more than their family. Otherwise, they stay home. So you can know the values. So you put your values and you do that. You take the first one and compare it to the others, and if that is more important than the others, that's the first one. And you take the second one and do the same with the others until you have a list of values. You can rank them. Why is it important to rank the values? Because there are going to be situations in which two of your values are going to be at odds, and you have to decide which one is more important for you. But that's a personal thing. And that's part of the spiritual intelligence. And finally, my higher self is so strong and clearly in control that decisions become relatively easy, even when consequences of those decisions are not easy to see and may provoke sadness. Universal self and higher self are tightly connected and values are aligned. So you may be in a situation that your company where you're working is doing something that is illegal or harming. So if your values is to your career and stay and get paid and protect your family with what you're paying, you stay there and you don't say anything. But if your values is truth, then you become a whistleblower with all the risks of your family and all the things that happen. That's because you know what your values are and you react with your values. So again, the skill here is go from knowing what your values are all the way down to have them ranked and always act for those values no matter what. The skill is not telling you which values are included. It's telling you how to manage your values. That's the skill. You see how this is content independent. It tries to be content independent. Skill 4. This is very important. Complexity of inner thought. The Dalai Lama was asked, this is something that Lynn told me, and the Dalai Lama was asking in one interview, what is the most important thing that the world needs now? And everybody was waiting till he will say what? Compassion, peace. You know what he said?
Critical thinking.
Critical thinking.
Who said that?
The Dalai Lama.
Oh, yes.
Critical thinking. So, I understand that rules and guidelines are sometimes a higher principle required that I break the rules. I understand that decisions involving multiple people are complex. So that's the first level. Second level is I consider multiple points of view when I make decisions. Knowing what's right or wrong is not a simple matter, for example, in biomedical ethical cases. Yeah, the doctor that has to make the decision of saving the child or saving the mother. How do you do that? You know? How do you, you have one dose of medicine and you have, the CEO of a company and the son of a baker. And both have the money to pay for it. Which one you give the... those are real things. So you need to have complexity. I understand there is no guaranteed outcomes for decisions I have to make. I can make decisions in the face of insufficient information. That's a high spiritual intelligence because all decisions are made in the face of sufficient. You never have all the information you need. I mean, you might think because you're not clear on how to make decisions. Fourth, I can see that two apparently conflicted points of view can both contain elements of truth. There's no black and white. We live in a world of paradox. There's really no black and white. Either, not even in, when you say white and you put a white paint or a black, that white is not white and that black is not black. If you look with a microscope, there's no pure black and pure white. Everything is across a spectrum. That's another understanding. And finally, I enjoy thinking about complex and even conflicting ideas. I can embrace paradox and mystery. It reads like a piece of poetry, huh? That last one, because it's poetry. I can embrace paradox and mystery. Okay, so finally, the skill 5 of the quadrant 1, which is self-awareness, is awareness of ego, self, and higher self. I have a basic understanding that an ego self exists and that how it reacts to things is a result of my personal experience since birth, including the influence of my family and my culture. That thing that we are so proud of is because we were born in this country or that country and we speak that language and it's not inherent to us. If we were born, if I was being born with the same body and in the same family of Hitler, I will be a Hitler. And it's important that we understand that. Second, I can observe my own ego in operation. That's a biggie. I understand there's a difference between the desires of my ego and my higher self. I can recognize the situations and types of people that trigger my ego self to want to take charge. I recognize signals my body gives me when my ego has been triggered. Fourth, I can consistently hear the voice of my higher self. This may be a felt sense in the body or an audition or visual experience of a combination. I may not hear it often, but I know it when I do. I am learning to listen to it. I understand how my thoughts and beliefs are creating the anger or fear I feel. Finally, the voice of my higher self is now the principal voice I hear. Ego is now in joyful service to spirit. I no longer feel a tug of war between these two parts of myself. That will be beautiful. Poetry. So this first quadrant and these first 5 skills will give you this, calm inside, and you know yourself, and you come from a place that is so familiar inside of you that you call your inner self, and you will eternally be getting close to it because it's a receding, but you are in that aspect. So this is the first quadrant. Now let's go to the second quadrant. Once you have that, it says the life where we live, the universe, is interconnected. So the first, I show respect for all human life. I can share the joy of others. I can stay open-hearted and aware from other people are in pain. It takes a balancing level of wisdom to stay open-hearted without burning out. Remember we would say that about helping people, the helping profession. Second, I respect organic life, including animals, and I care the joy and suffering of all forms. So you see the progression. Here we talk about people, here we include animals. And then I feel connected to Earth as a living ecosystem and living sustainable and the planet. So you're going from respecting your tribe, your people, then humans, then include animals, then the ecosystem. I understand the natural systems are complex, are even chaotic. Now we understand the universe. And finally, I know that my thoughts are helping to create the life I experience. I understand that the universe is an intelligent, self-organizing system. Energy and matter are interchangeable. My thoughts are creating the life I experience, not the external life. Because this is the other confusion. My thoughts create the experience. That's what's created, the way we interpret things. Do you want to say what you came out yesterday, that when you start seeing how even things, we were walking and you were start seeing that even things were
You mean
created?
when I was driving up in the car?
Yeah.
We drove up
Come
to
here.
Phoenix, and
Come here.
we were driving up from Phoenix, and normally, there's a car pulled off the side of the road. And this time I kept seeing cars pulled off by the side of the road. It was one after another. And so my mind, I could see it start looking for a theory. I love making a theory about something. I want to make meaning. So I'm thinking, God, it has something to do with the weather? No, it's not very hot. Does it have, are the gas stations, is there something about gas stations not getting gas? And I was going bananas,
trying to find a reason why there would be 5 or 6 cars pulled off the road.
And I didn't even notice the car.
Well, he wasn't. He was impatient.
So we created
But
the
wait.
experience.
Yeah, but what I noticed is I'm not, and then I realized the fact that I do this, I'm always coming up with some theory for things. I'm probably almost always wrong. You know, I might as well just leave it. There are 5 cars by the road. Why does my mind have to make this meaning out of it? So it was a really interesting experience for me to watch.
What was your theory?
The fact that I could always come up with a theory. I love theories. I've always got a theory for everything, as you know. But I couldn't come up with one. And that was just driving me insane.
She didn't see the people taking photos outside the car. Okay. Skill 7, awareness of the worldviews of others. Other people think different from us. But we don't know that. I listen to different points of view even when they oppose mine. How many people you know that do that? I seek opportunities to learn about and understand others' point of view. Well, how many people do you know? Oh, how interesting, you think different from me. Let me know how you think. I don't think that very often. 3, I understand other people's points of view and tune into their feelings, even during a conflict. I want to understand their thoughts and their feelings. More skillful, huh? 4, I have compassion for the hopes and fears that we all share, regardless of our worldviews. I can demonstrate to people that I understand their feelings. I have chosen a worldview from which to operate from among the many options I now understand. So that's the other point. I get to a point, yeah, I have a worldview. I want to see the world in a certain way. I know that particularly here we have this integral worldview, that everything is interconnected, that things transcend, that include, that there is no one person on the planet intelligent enough to be 100% wrong all the time. When I learn a better way of looking things, I revise my own worldview. Through compassionate understanding, I can put myself inside the worldview of anyone, including murderers and terrorists. Other people feel that I really do understand their point of view. That's a very high skill. When I do the test, I get 5 in everything, because I know all the answers. So the test doesn't work for me.
Not gonna work for anybody else here either.
No, it's going to work. Because these are the results, not the questions. I'm not giving the questions. Okay. Skill 8. Breadth of time-space perception. That's another important skill in life. I am aware of how I have grown and changed over time. I'm going to go a little bit quick through this because we have a lot to go through. I enjoy or have enjoyed learning about human story from early civilization to the present time. I enjoy and have enjoyed learning geological and biological stories. So this is more inclusive, you know. And as you study more and you see more to the final, I have experienced a sense of transcendent timelessness, a sense of being outside of time. The experience has permanently altered how I see life. I see the grand and limitless beauty of creation. That would be a beautiful place to be, huh? To have that breadth of time and perception, to just open your eyes in the morning and feel that you're part of 13.7 billion years of evolution, and that even that is a blip in a mystery that we cannot understand. And you can have that experience inside all the moment. That would be a beautiful place to be. Skill 9, powers and limitations of human perception. I'm aware of this. I understand our 5 physical senses do not tell everything us that is real. That's that's a great advance. Most people think that what they see, what they smell, what they touch is real. It's exactly what it is. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not real in the sense that it doesn't exist, but it's not real in the sense that what we think it is not what it is. I understand the value of the 6th sense, intuition, in accessing other parts of what is real. I understand we have to create experiences in our life through our beliefs, thoughts. I see in the body life experience as both an illusion and a reality, and I am able to access the deepest reality by occasional transcendent moments. And finally, I am consistently, this is the key there, consistently able to access the universal knowing and 5 physical senses. I am guided by a profound inner knowing, a connectedness I cannot really explain. That's another beautiful place to be. So as we develop all these skills, we get to these places more and more and more. Oh, beautiful life if we have spiritual intelligence. Skill 10, awareness of spiritual laws. And here, these spiritual laws are, what are the spiritual laws? But there are spiritual laws. Each religion has spiritual laws. We have some spiritual laws. We believe in that. I want to live a spiritual life. I know the basic rules of my own traditional culture for how to be a spiritual person. I can explain why a basic principle like the golden rule is important. I can tell stories that show how my life is better because I live by basic spiritual principles like the golden rule. I am familiar with the less action-oriented, more invisible inward spiritual teachings, principles such as what I focus on expands. I can tell stories about how my life is better because I live by more complex spiritual principles. For Leo, I deepen my understanding of a spiritual principle by living it wholehearted and seeing how it works. And finally, this is the beauty, I effortlessly apply spiritual principles in my life even when I am under great stress. So I live by, I know that whatever I think, whatever I feel, whatever I move in my inner self, even if I'm saying another thing, is affecting the other person. I'm completely aware of the impact of who I am in the presence of others and live by those principles. That's a beautiful place to be. Skill 11, experience of transcendent oneness. This has to do with the capacity to be in states of meditation. I have at times when I am completely focused on whatever I am doing, and times seems to fly by, moments of flow. Everybody experiences that from moment to moment. Or I have unexpected experience that make me feel lighter, happier, and more connected. I have a profound, awe-inspiring moment of connection with a higher power or a transcendent level of reality, emptiness in Buddhism. My perceptions are permanently altered due to these transcendent moments of connection with a higher power and higher reality. If we were talking here about states, we will talk about being in the witness, a permanent state of witness. And finally, I've learned how to regularly place myself into a state of transcendent connection with a higher power, higher reality. So I'm a seasoned meditator. I can really get in touch with a samadhi very regularly. With most meditators, after 10, 20 years, they can. I mean, they sit to meditate. They have this beautiful experience. Charlie guided us to a beautiful thing. Most people that come to these meetings, they know that they can just in 2 or 3 minutes just go to this big space inside. So this is a skill that we can develop. Skill 12, commitment to spiritual growth. This is another very important part that has to do with, are you serious about your spiritual life? I seek to learn about spiritual topics from people, articles, books, or sacred teachings from within the belief system in which I was raised. I seek to learn about spiritual topics from people, articles, books, and sacred teachings from outside the belief system in which I was raised. I ask higher power and my higher self to help me to improve and grow spiritually. I participate in learning activities that involve other people, such as retreats, workshops, therapy. I participate in spiritual learning activities by myself, such as reading, meditation, etc. I am aware of when there are differences between the spiritual beliefs and how I believe in my personal work or life. I feel a need to align my actions with my spiritual values when they don't match, even when it's painful. And finally, I am totally committed to living a life of integrity. I will work toward change in my company if its practices did not match my spiritual values. I would leave my job if it did not match my spiritual values.
Yeah, it seems like some of these are skewed. Like number one, I couldn't see the majority of, the world, or at least our country even being near one. And so it seems like skewed, like you need something before that.
Okay. Yes and no, and I'm going to tell you why. Because the fact is, and this is a tricky question. Most people get a 0 here. You know why? And I'm giving you the. Most people get a 0 here because one of the first things that you have is a reaction against the religion that you started with. And you think that a growth is to go out of the religion instead of deepening into that religion, because that religion has a beautiful and powerful mystic side.
I want to say something else about this, which is that, yes, just even the idea of looking at, a lot of people aren't even bothering to look, so they get a 0. But she points out, and that can stop a person who actually might have a higher level of spiritual growth. And she makes that note on that test. When you get your results back on this test, they are not locked in stone. So if you discuss it with the coach and you think you should change your score, then you change your score.
Yeah.
So I think, like a question like that, I kind of disagree with a question like that, because I think it does block people who might move forward. I don't know. But the issue is really, I think the issue that's interesting in that one is, do you stick within the belief system you're in, or do you move outside of it? So that's significant, and I don't know if it's phrased well, and I can't remember what the actual question is. But I think it's a good point.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And again, I want to stress, this is not a mathematics class. This is not. This is something. The beauty of this spiritual intelligence assessment and what is that there are very few people that have codified this in a way that we can talk and work and develop the skills. There's another one that is James Fowler. It's called The Stages of Faith, which is beautiful also. But this is a way to start the conversation of a spiritual intelligence that is very powerful. Okay, so yes. Skill 13, keeping higher self in charge. So it goes from I occasionally identify when, this is important. I can occasionally identify when I'm acting from ego. I understand that acting from ego will not help me in long-term satisfaction. I am unhappy with how ego handles things. I want to find another way to handle events. All the way down to higher self muscle has been developed by consistently daily practice for a long time. It is now a habit. Higher self is in charge, even profoundly trying times and or when group thinking pressures for an ego response. So the idea here is, do you have the awareness of the way when you say something? For example, I'm standing here and I say something to respond, and Lynn looks at me and say, no, I'm not. What happens inside of me? Do I feel, why is she interrupting me? What is these people are going to think, that I didn't prepare this? I'm not intelligent. Do I know those things inside of me? Do I know those responses? Or I just react and after finish, why did you interrupt me during the lesson? We're not aware of those things. But this is a skill. If we are aware of that, we can see those things happen, but our higher self can see and say, okay, lower nature, calm down. Thank you for sharing. But this is a skill. Do we have that skill? That's important. 14, living your purpose and values. So we have the values defined. Now I can speak about my mission values with people I trust, all the way that I will make values-based choices even when my own life is at stake. Okay? So here, and some of these interlope with others, you know, but it's a way to think. Skill 15, sustaining faith even during tough times. It's has to be with the values too. But in this case, it's my belief in a higher power. One of the things that I've been, you know, I've been really understanding and believing and getting more and more adjust to that thing is one phrase that says that development, you become the God that you think it was God. Yeah. You want to explain a little bit about that, because it's important and it has to do with.
Well, I think I touched on it, yes, that we all have an idea of God at various levels of development. So our God might be this God, this person who's looking down on us and seeing if we're good or bad. Well, then we develop a sense of self-responsibility. So we, in essence, have become that God. We are our own God. We look at ourselves and we know if we're behaving well or not. And at that point, our God might be something about what causes the universe to operate as it does, the great intelligence. And then we realize, well, we're actually the ones who are creating our world around us. We're using our intelligence to do it. So in some not entirely, but in some sense, we become that God. And then we look around and we say, well, this world isn't perfect, so there's got to be a loving spirit somewhere. So then God becomes a loving spirit. And then we come to another stage and we realize, wait a minute, human beings are the one in this relative reality that has to bring that loving spirit. So we become then the ones who are bringing it. And so we continue to do that. So I think it's really interesting to look at what you think God is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can become that and God will become something
Bigger.
greater next
Yeah.
time. You know?
So yeah, so just to repeat, the idea that, I'm sorry?
Yes. My God is formless, invisible, and timeless.
Formless, invisible, and timeless. Okay. When you become formless, invisible, and timeless, God is going to recede and be something else. Well, that's what the Buddha said he became.
Well, in essence, that's non-duality.
Yeah.
So that when you have non-dual consciousness, that you will be that formlessness, that formlessness.
The idea here is that at the higher level, I no longer fear my own death because of my strong connection with a higher power, loving intelligence universe. The word, my ego willingly surrendered my need to control and understand everything. Profoundly at peace as a result. I got to a point that the mystery is the mystery. I mean, and I am profoundly at peace and grateful for the result. Another beautiful state to be. So we grow little by little into that. That's that skill. Okay.
One line above number 3, willing to share anger with higher power or loving intelligent universe. Can you explain that, or is it a little bit paradoxical?
Willing to share anger with higher power or well, it's a little bit what I said before. I was willing to share my anger of she interrupting me with my higher power so that I don't have to express it and my loving. See, we can act on things or just. The other thing that can be explained there is, for example, the Buddhists have a practice called Tonglen. Yeah, which consists in basically taking the gunk of the world into your heart and transmute it. And this is what Jesus said: love thy enemy. You know, I mean, it
could also mean being vulnerable.
Being vulnerable.
Vulnerable enough to admit your anger.
Exactly. And again, each one of these quadrants we can spend. I just want to go as quickly. Now, 16, seeking guidance from higher self. We saw this, yeah. No, we didn't. Okay, it goes from I seek guidance on how live good life from respected authority figures and external sources such as sacred texts. So I put the power outside, all the way to I have increasing sense of effortless alignment with spirit, inner guidance system so well developed and alignment so well practiced that most of the time staying aligned is just a part of who I am. A feeling of surrender, transformation of ego self, higher self, spirit has occurred. And again, think about this. In the end, even if we believe in something like the Bible, we're making a choice and we're taking a risk. Let me say it again. Even if we believe that something is absolutely truth, like the Bible, and we believe exactly in that, we are making the choice to believe in that, and we are taking a risk. So, skill 17. Wise and effective teacher of spiritual principles. I enjoy teaching people about spiritual principles. I teach others about spiritual principles without any need to control. I teach others about spiritual things by being wise and compassionate. Third, I teach by encouraging others to think for themselves. Fourth, when I teach and how I behave are the same. I walk my talk. And finally, I am a peaceful, compassionate, and wise in times of stress. Skill 18. I am able to see and is the wise and effective leader. So this is different. This is a teacher of principles and this is a leader. Okay? I'm able to see and name the pain and suffering of all parties involved in a charged situation, creating trust relationship with all parties. I understood that the pain is real, even if it seems to be illogical. I feel compassion for all points of view. This is the first level, which I hope people will get there. At a higher level, the 5, I am able to walk away from a failed change initiative with no loss of faith in people or the universe. If a change initiative fails, I seek to learn how I can be a better change agent next time. No blaming, absolutely clarity that every experience is that, an experience. There's no failures, there's just the next step. This is a whole course on leadership. Developing your leadership skills is part of your spiritual intelligence. Skill 19, makes compassionate and wise decisions. That's the other thing. How we make decisions. Again, we never will know. We make the decision and we don't know until the thing happens. And even if the decision works, like for example, I had this example. It's beautiful. There was this. It's a documentary. I think it's in if I'm not wrong, it might be in PBS or the History Channel, and it's about wolves in a Canadian province. I think I might have some things wrong, so don't quote me on that. But the thing is that the wolves were not there, and they reintroduced the wolves. And all of a sudden, it was Yellowstone, yeah. And all of a sudden, trees started to grow better, things flow better, the rivers, birds started to become, because introduced the wolves. What was happening? There was more antelopes in the park that the park could handle, and they were grazing, and more grazing were impacting all of the ecosystem. The wolves came and started killing the antelope, and the thing balanced. What is the decision? We don't know. We really, life is so complex that makes compassion and wise decision is another spiritual skill. And it goes from I'm able to make decision with compassion toward myself, maintaining intention to develop and grow, but not berating self for not being enlightened yet. 2, I am able to be compassionate towards children, spouses, relatives, and friends who are not working on their own growth in a manner or speed. I might wish they were able to let them grow as they will, knowing that I can really know what is the highest and best for any person. I can't really know. 3rd, I am able to be compassionate towards those who feel they are my enemy or who act to harm me. Not that I have the intention, that I am able to feel that. That's a high skill. I set healthy boundaries around behaviors, but don't hate the person acting out. I use power wisely, carefully, and with loving intent. Ironclad, what is your phrase?
Oh, I have a phrase, I love it. It's to have infinite compassion and ironclad boundaries.
Infinite compassion and ironclad boundaries.
God,
Thank
if I could do that, I'd be, yeah.
Universal and self-awareness is so strong that the decision always factor in the pain and suffering of other beings. Yet I am not paralyzed by this awareness. I take balanced actions that honor all beings. And finally, universal awareness and a strong connection with higher self means that my inner guidance is strongly and clearly felt. With steady self-mastery, my inner guidance is translated into wise and compassionate action, which seems to flow through me from source. And again, some of these things are poetic, but you see how is the crescendo on that skill of being capable of make compassionate and wise decisions. The skill 20 is a calming and healing presence. 1. My increasing egolessness had led a noticeable drop in people trying to get me to engage in gossip or victim stories. Spirit is starting to be noticeable in charge. If a lot of people were at this level, what do you think will happen to Facebook? I'm just saying. 2, my increase in inner calm and outer calm leads to increasing effectiveness with others when they are upset. My compassionate gel-can manner lets them calm down. 3rd, my inner and outer calms leads to decisions and action feeling effortlessly effective. It seems to know what to do and how to act in situations. My energy level seems steady. I am able to actively serve in whatever my calling is while not getting overly depressed by suffering I can relieve or losing my boundaries. I have found joyful, sustainable service. 4th, I am focused less on doing something to help or fix things and more on being peace, love, and wisdom in a situation. This seems to take all the fun out of conflict, and others literally run out of steam in my presence. They may even find themselves a bit embarrassed to have been behaving poorly. And finally, I am spirit. This is what the Buddha was in the road with this killer or assassin that became a saint. I am spirit. Ego has been transformed. By radiating love and Jesus and not judgment, others seem to be able to access their higher selves in my presence. My higher self seems to be called forth theirs. Solutions to problems appear magically coming through me. Others say they feel profoundly peaceful in my presence. Wow. Can you imagine just walking by Buddha or Jesus or Ajasanti or Thich Nhat Hanh, or there's so many people that you go there and it's like, wow. And the hugging saint, what is her name? She came here, Amma. You are in the presence of that person. It's like, oh my God. There are people like that. Spiritual intelligence. And finally, skill 21, being aligned with the ebb and flow of life. I can sense when the timing is right for something and act on it. wow, if that's the first level, it will be great that people can be even at this first level. Remember, spiritual intelligence is on top of EQ, so that's as the highest of all. So the lowest of the highest of spiritual intelligence, you can sense when the timing is right in something, an accident. How many people have good timing? Okay. 2, obstacles can have multiple meanings. They can mean it is time to slow down, time to work harder, or a sign that the direction I am taking might not be right. I tune into my higher self to determine what action, if any, to take when obstacles arise. 3, I can recognize the difference between the blessings and distractions that appear in my path. The right people and resources appear when I need them. We become a magnet when we behave like that. 4, my work is guided by natural timing. I know when to push ahead and when to pause. I observe my body and immediately notice subtle changes in my sense of being or being energized. These body signals help me to stay in touch with natural ebbs and flows of life. And finally, I live joyfully in the eternal present moment. Who I am and what I do is one effortless dance. So those are the descriptions of the 20 skills of spiritual intelligence. So like I said, there is an assessment that, according to your answers, will tell you what you yourself say that you are in this, and you can have a coach discuss with you what skills, what actions, because part of what they work with the spiritual intelligence and the people that we are working in this and the coaches that we're training in this is that we have resources for each skill. We have books, exercises, seminars to develop that particular skills that we know it works best in the different levels. So thank you very much. Let's have 5 minutes for questions. And just one thing before. Remember, if any one of you wants this presentation, just send me an email and I will just send the PowerPoint to you. So you don't have to. Yeah, you can send to the Sedona, the LP Sedona. You just tell us, or you can just send an email to Jose@transformationteaching.com. Teaching. Transformation teaching. Not some people put transformational. It's not transformationteaching.com. Jose@transformationteaching. Okay.
Can you just clarify the relationship between the progress of emotional development and then the spiritual intelligence and then the spiritual? At first I thought you said, I thought I just heard you say that you kind of already have to be pretty involved in the emotional intelligence, but I didn't.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes and no.
Well,
I'm not sure.
okay.
Because you said that it was capstone so that it could keep increasing. And
Capstone, yeah.
That kind of made more sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. You don't. Okay. Do you remember that in the very beginning? Let me just go back very quickly. This is a point that we discussed largely with Sydney in the certification. Where is that skill? It's a very good question, and I'm going to. Okay. Initially, when the model was created, it was created like the top of it, so that implies what you were saying. Now, in a discussion that she had with the creators of spiritual intelligence, they say that probably should be a capstone, because you can grow in cognitive and emotional intelligence and you can at the same time be developing your spiritual intelligence. So all of this can and this is what they think. Now we know from Ken's work that they're independent. They're called lines of development. So you can develop in your emotional intelligence, you can develop in your cognitive intelligence, and you can develop in your spiritual intelligence independently. Now, research has also shown that cognitive intelligence, cognitive development, is a necessary but not sufficient intelligence or line of development for the faster development of the other lines. For example, knowing about the equal or the integral theory, knowing about the math, is what is called psychoactive. The fact that you know that you're growing, that there's possibilities for you to grow, that in itself helps you to start growing. And when you start understanding the theory, you see your situation more clearly, and humility can start kicking in for you to say, maybe I need to grow. So that. And now, emotional intelligence, even though it's also a necessary but not sufficient, because if you don't have a good emotional intelligence, you are so centered in yourself. Every emotion take over, and you cannot relate to other people. So it's difficult to develop spiritual intelligence if you don't have some emotional intelligence.
Right, it's almost like there's certain parts of each one that are necessary for it, but not all of it.
Not all of it,
You know,
yeah.
It seems like it's,
Yeah, that's why it's a capstone, and it goes growing.
yeah.
And the idea is, when in another of the presentation that we're gonna do a whole 2 hours on lines of development and centers of gravity. What you're going to see is that you can have a center of gravity on your development, but some of the lines can be higher than others. You know, it's something like I think I have. There it is. You can have your IQ can be very developed. Your moral, for example. If you think of a scientist, a Nazi doctor, they have to have a huge IQ to create rockets and chambers of gas chambers and disposals, but the moral development has to be very low. I mean, you have to be a genius to create a gas chamber and those, you know, to dispose of the bodies and all of that and all the logistics around that. But you have to have a very low moral intelligence to do that. To be able to,
Often in our society.
yeah,
Such advanced knowledge and
yeah, yeah.
some are knowledge and so little more.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I had a just little thought that the more spiritual developed we focus on that, an interesting way that our physicality, we take better care of our bodies, you know, it works back.
Oh yeah, that's a,
Holistic thing. I like to think that I'm getting healthier physically as I get.
yeah, that's I know that's the kinesthetic. And yeah, when we talk about development, we talk integral development. So all the lines have to be developed.
They all affect.
We're talking particularly today about spiritual development. We'll talk about other things and others. Okay. Thank you very much.